This episode is brought to you by Pixel 2 Editions, a full-service fine art printing company. More about them later. Hello and welcome to In the Art Scene podcast, an art podcast that has it all. I'm your host, Galina Marquez, and I invite fascinating people to talk about their personal creative journeys, success stories, and inspiration. We talk about art business and marketing, how to find your creative voice, and all the new trends in the art world like NFT, AI, and such. Join me and my guest for today's conversation. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to In the Art Scene podcast. And I am having a very interesting guest photographer, Peter Merts, with me today on the podcast. Peter, did I pronounce your last name correctly? Peter
Yes.
Merts. Okay. So I know of Peter. We haven't met personally, unfortunately, yet, but Peter is doing a great job with Prison Arts Collective, which you have learned on this podcast a little while ago. We had a founder and director, Annie Buckley, with us. So Annie kindly made a connection. It was really, really nice. And I know that you, Peter, doing an amazing job with them. And beyond that, you have multiple projects. So I am looking forward to learning everything about your art. So why wouldn't you introduce yourself, in your own words right now, and we will go from there.
Okay. Thanks, Galina, for the introduction. I'm Peter Merts. Live north of San Francisco. I've been a photographer for a bit over 40 years. And my work tends to be split between fine art projects and what I call advocacy work, where I'm shooting for an organization or a cause. And it's the latter that we got connected on, which is my work with documenting prison artists. Which is my current large project. I've been working on this project for about 15 years.
Wow.
And I have now photographed art classes in all 36 California state prisons.
Are you only working with Prison Arts Collective, or there are other organizations alike?
There are other organizations. So most of my work falls under the Arts and Corrections program. The Arts and Corrections program
which is a California Arts Council program.
Right. Yeah. Funded by the Department of Corrections, administered by the California Arts Council. And the California Arts Council contracts with arts providers around the state. Arts providers are organizations that work with artists. So local county arts councils, for example, Riverside Arts Council, Fresno Arts Council, Arts Council of Kern, as well as arts nonprofits such as the Marin Shakespeare Company, the Actors Gang, which is based out of the Los Angeles area, William James Association. So usually I'm requested to photograph an art class by one of these organizations, and PAC is one as well. PAC is a little special. There are two of these, or there are probably about 20 organizations altogether that provide art instructions in the prisons. And the two that I'm most closely associated with are William James Association, which does a lot of the programming up here in Northern California, and PAC, or Prison Arts Collective, which is based down in San Diego and does a lot of Southern California programming. And I'm on the advisory board of the Prison Arts Collective, as well as photographing for them. So
wow.
That's my background in a nutshell.
I honestly, I had no idea that such programs exist in California for so long. I mean, you've been doing it for 15 years. So what is, when I first learned about this program, and I immediately reached out to Prison Arts Collective, because I thought, well, this is the way for me to volunteer, because that's such a huge impact on the well-being of humans who otherwise are deprived of, just basic basic joys of life. Uh, so I understand why it is such an important project for you, but I wanted to hear from you how did you start, and what's your take on it, and how does it make you feel?
Sure. The way I got started is that for the first photographic project I did, the one that really got me started as a photographer in the late 70s, 1970s, I got a job with Bread and Roses, which is a nonprofit organization here in my home county of Marin. Bread and Roses takes entertainment inside to people who can't go outside to hear entertainment. So, particularly people who are incarcerated or in institutions of any sort, hospitals, drug rehab, um, uh, senior centers, Alzheimer's daycare centers. So I was photographing for Bread and Roses for years, and every once in a while they would do a concert at San Quentin, which is the prison here in Marin County, and I would go and photograph the bands that were playing at the prison. And one day, I believe it was a Michael Franti concert at San Quentin 15, 17 years ago. I was photographing the concert on the yard, and a man approached me who worked at San Quentin. He ran the art program and said, "Peter, if you're interested in this music concert here, maybe you'd be interested in helping us document our art programs. You want to come visit?" So I went and visited and just fell in love with the program. The men were so highly motivated. They were some had not been artists before taking the class. Some had been artists. The more experienced artists were mentoring the younger ones. There was sort of a lively industry in the room, and people were very respectful and appreciative of me. And they were creating great art. And I noticed the relationships between the artists and the instructors were very respectful and appreciative. And I thought, well, I want to find out more about this. So I just kept going back. Initially, I was going only to San Quentin, which is just 6 miles from my home. Mm-hmm. Eventually, I started to go into other programs, which are a little further out. And what helped me to do that was some of the teaching organizations began to be able to help pay my expenses. So when I had to travel to really far shoots for driving and motel, they helped me cover that. Let's see. Gosh, well, I'm not sure what else to say.
So, how does it make you feel?
Oh, well, I'm really inspired by the artistry and the enthusiasm of these incarcerated artists. One thing I've noticed is that they don't hold back. You know, when they go. First of all, it's only people with clean records who are able to take the class. If they've had a disciplinary infraction within the last year, they can't take the class. And so the people who can take the class, they sort of self-police the class because they don't want one person to mess it up for everybody. Because if something happens in the class tends to get shut down for sometimes months at a time. And so they all sort of self-police. Just the enthusiasm with which the artists throw themselves into things, particularly like dance and drama, music. There's no holding back or wait until the next guy goes. They may be in the first class or two, but I usually wait until the class has been running for a few weeks before I go into photograph. By then, people have settled down. They're working together well. They're just humming along, and that's really fun to photograph. That sort of stuff. So, very inspiring artists. And artwork being created.
So it sounds like you mentioned a couple of times, no holding back. It sounds like there's a very pure creative energy release. So why do you think it's happening that way in prison?
Well, for one thing, the men and women are really hungry for positive things to do. there is different kinds of programming. There's academic programming, there's substance abuse programming, anger management, those sorts of things, religious programming. Um, and and different things work for different people. So for some people, art is what really grabs their attention and is something they can hold onto. They really also, men and women inside very rarely get positive reinforcement, right? Most of the reinforcement inside a prison is negative. And so when they're able to accomplish things and get recognition from the instructor and from the other students, and then from other men or women outside on the yard, it really changes their whole attitude about themselves and about life, and they get engaged in a positive way with things. Artists tend to be respected inside of prisons. Some people find that surprising, but a lot of the artists will do commissions. So if a man has a snapshot of his daughter, but he's not himself an artist, and he wants maybe a pencil drawing or charcoal drawing of his daughter to give to her for her birthday, he'll contract with an artist and give the small print, and the artist will create that drawing.
All on the inside.
All on the inside, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So yes, and they'll be paid with stamps or other things from the commissary. They find ways to pay each other because there's no currency inside the prison.
Wow, that's very interesting. That sounds like art really affects the quality of life, not only on the emotional level, but on all kinds of levels for people on the inside. So you've been doing it for 15 years, and I assume you're gonna continue doing it for as long as you're capable. Is that right?
For now, I am, yes, unless another project comes along that steals my attention away. I'm over the 15 years, I've continued to evolve the way that I photograph and the way that I interact with the people inside. And I still have more ideas and things that I want to try. My work has become more intimate over the years, doing particularly with portraiture, really close portraiture. And I'm really finding that exciting. So yeah, I'd like to continue with that if possible. Back to what I was talking about earlier about what the art programs mean to these artists. I will say that a number of the artists, when they're finally released from prison, stay in touch with their art instructors and with the programs. And in fact, some of the artists who have been released from prison have been hired by the teaching organizations to go back inside and teach their former peers, which just completes the circle. And it's particularly meaningful to the men and women who are still incarcerated to have this former peer who's out now and doing well come back in and sort of bridge that inside to outside. Because a lot of men and women are fearful of when they're going to get out, right? It's a big unknown. Many of them are not prepared for it. So this connection with former incarcerated artists going back in as teaching artists really is a nice closing of the loop.
Yeah. Is there any other project, because you said that your work is kind of split between the advocacy and the fine art and photographing, documenting the art programs on the inside and in prisons is a big part of it, but I'm curious if you're involved in any other advocacy projects or have been or looking to.
Well, I've done a handful of advocacy projects over the years. The one main one is, other than Prison Arts, is the Bread and Roses organization that I mentioned before. I photographed for them off and on for 40 years. I've pulled back from Bread and Roses a little bit now because I'm so involved with the prison artwork. A couple of decades ago, I went to India and photographed a free school there in a slum in Rishikesh, India. And I think there've been some other smaller advocacy work that I'm doing. And I'm actually working with a photography-based organization here in Marin County now to teach a course on advocacy photography. The organization is called the Image Flow. It's a business, a service business, and we're putting together a class to help encourage other people to do advocacy photography for organizations and good work that's going on in their communities.
Well, that is actually very interesting. So I understand the class on photography. So what would the class on advocacy photography include? How do you, like, I mean, you don't have to, like, I'm not asking you to open up the secrets, but, you know, in a nutshell, how do you see that, you know, standing out from different photography classes?
Well, part of it is just I learned so many things over my decades of doing this sort of work that I learned by trial and error. And these are things that I can maybe convey to someone else. For example, when you start shooting for an organization, the photographer might think that they know what types of images work best for that organization. As I did when I was shooting for Bread and Roses, for example. But sometimes I don't know everything. And so I was informed at one point, shooting for Bread and Roses, and I shot for them a couple of prison programs, and was continuing to shoot prison programs sort of for Bread and Roses initially. And they let me know that they would like for me to continue shooting other non-prison programs that they should too, because they use one of the ways they use my photographs is for fundraising, and unfortunately, inmates of incarcerated people tend to raise as much funds as photographs of sick children.
Yeah.
So that was interesting for me to know, you know, what sort of photos work.
So in a way, you would become familiar with business processes of the organization, because the material that you produce is not only, you know, for them to showcase their work, it's also, you know, fulfilling some other purposes, like you said, like fundraising,
grant writing, newsletters, blogs, web posts, slideshows. Yeah, there are a number of different ways that my photographs have been used. They've been put in movies and books, textbooks. So it's good to talk to the organization, the consumers of the photographs in the organization. For example, maybe they want to do a piece in a magazine, and so maybe they want some vertical shots as opposed to all horizontal shots for formatting on the page. What are the sorts of things that we hope to teach? So a lot of it is sort of specific to what I call, from my point of view, is event photography. So, right, because a class, an art class is an event. So part of what I do, for example, if say I'm photographing a writing class, so that's one of the least dynamic classes in terms of physical movement and visual, because people are sitting at the table and writing. So usually when I'm documenting a writing class, rather than photograph people writing, I photograph people when they're reading when they read to the class, and then the reactions of the class. And gesture becomes very important when you're photographing somebody talking. And a lot of photographers who have not had experience photographing people talking don't know that if you wait for that gesture, it makes just such a difference between photographing this just a head or this, you know, with hands. Tips like that. Hopefully we can get into lighting a little bit. Lighting is really bad in prisons, so I take my own lights with me. And over the years, I've changed the way that I've used lights. So we might get into lighting with these folks. There's also HIPAA requirements, privacy, medical record privacy that sometimes comes into play depending on an organization. There's certainly privacy issues in all cases. Will you need written permission before you start shooting an organization? Those sorts of things. So we're trying to bundle all those sorts of things that could be helpful in doing this kind of photography.
Yeah. So why do you think it is important to encourage the new generation of photographers to commit their work to some advocacy programs?
Well, for me, I learned so much doing this advocacy photography because I would maybe start out tentatively with Bread and Roses. I was shooting with them a little bit, but then as the photographs began to be used, that was very rewarding to me that Bread and Roses was using my photographs. So that was encouraging. So I began to do it more and more. And now I'm really plugged into the organization and the work that it's doing. And because I wanted to continue doing that work and improve my images so that they could be even better for the organization, I learned so much about lighting and working with human subjects, and just posing and technical aspects of photography. What aperture works best when shooting in a crowd, those sorts of things. So for me, it's been so rewarding. It's been really the backbone of my photography career is the advocacy work. I've just learned so much and had such a good time. I've become involved in the communities around these organizations. So the community of Bread and Roses and the community of Prison Arts it's a rich, wonderful, generous community, as you can imagine. I'm meeting all these artists the teaching artists when I shoot in the prisons. I've photographed most of the teaching artists that are teaching in California prisons. Well, up until the pandemic, the pandemic put on everything, and now things are restarting slowly in the prisons. Although the programs keep getting reshut down as new waves hit the prisons. But yeah, it's just been a wonderful. Advocacy photography has been a wonderful sort of structure or context for me to work in and learn so much and have a great time with my photography.
So you want more photographers to experience what you have experienced.
Yes, and I appreciate the service that we provide for our communities. It just feels really good to be able to help in some of these situations.
Hey, In the Arts and listeners, do you remember Mark O'Donnell from Pixel 2 Editions? He's been on the show in Season 3, Episode 7, and told us everything we need to know about giclée printing. And take my word for it, Mark and his team are the best in Southern California and beyond. I've been a client of Pixel 2 Editions since 2019, and I've been shouting about them from the rooftops ever since. Luckily, I don't have to do it anymore because I have a podcast. Despite being San Diego local, Mark and his team are working with some of the best photographers and artists from all states, including Clark Little and Kadir Nelson. And frankly, if you are a photographer or a digital artist, you don't need to be local to work with Pixel 2 Editions. Just use a file upload on their website for your heavy images and write down the specs. They can print small proofs for you on any substrate you want and ship them to you for free. And for my listeners, they offer a free 8x10 full image proof on metal. Just tell them that you heard about them on the podcast and they will take care of you. Let me tell you, their metal prints are amazing. Whenever I order mine, they fly off the shelves in no time. So I highly recommend you try it out. And did I mention that they are a full service company? It means that they do everything from color correcting and printing to framing and shipping directly to you or your clients. So don't wait, go to pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number, and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Again, pixel2editions.com, 2 is a number, and editions is plural, or call 858-549-7299. Say hi for me. If you would imagine another kind of advocacy program, what you would want to be involved in. I mean, you're such a big advocate for arts in prison and arts in general, but is there something that you crave as a photographer, like some sort of a movement that you would want to uh, work with, like a dream job, a dream project?
Well, Arts and Corrections is my dream project now. There's not another one that's sort of burning a hole in my pocket right now, but I have had a few ideas. One is, there are dog training programs in prisons, and that's always been fascinating to me. I love animals, and now I've had a lot of experience photographing in prisons, and I'm known within the Department of Corrections here in California, and so it's easier for me to get in now than the photographer that's not known by the Department of Corrections. So I would love. I've thought about photographing dog training programs. Now I know a woman up here in Northern California who's doing that, and I've spoken with her, and hopefully she's going to come to the class that we're putting together and talk about her experiences. Another thing that's been calling to me lately is there are these great programs in the prisons for art, but and a lot more people were released from prison these last couple of years because of the pandemic. There was sort of emergency release of people, shortening of sentences, but it's hard for men and women when they get out and they try to rejoin community. Or as one incarcerated person said to me, when I go out, I'm not going to rejoin community. I never felt a part of the community at all to begin with. So he was feeling like he was going to be at a loss. But there are some people that are beginning to recognize these shortcomings and providing money for programming, arts programming and other types of programming for people after they come out. And I thought that would be a very interesting project to work on, would be programs for returned citizens, as we call them. So those are a couple of ideas I've had. Another really more of a fine art project that I'm thinking about doing is I love walking, and I live in a beautiful area. There's a lot of nature around me here. I spend a lot of time walking in the hills and trails around Northern California, and I'm working on a sort of landscape-based project around that. I haven't quite figured it out yet, so it's still very much early stages. But hopefully that'll be another fine art project that I could undertake.
Well, that's actually a very nice segue, because I was going to start the other series of questions about your other half of work that you do, which is fine art photography. Can you talk a little bit? And I see some black and white landscapes behind you in your office. I assume this is your work, which is absolutely striking.
Yeah.
So
pieces there.
Yeah. I love that, and I love black and white photography. It's something that I have I have a soft spot for black and white photography when it's really done artistically. So could you talk a little bit more about you as a fine art photographer?
Sure.
Sort of your upbringing and the work that you have done.
Sure. The last major fine art project I did was, so first of all of my projects tend to be long-term, like 10 years or so, or 15 years. And so I was working on a long fine art project called Solitude, which was based in the landscape. There are no people in the Solitude. It's all some manufactured objects and landscapes. What was I going to say about that? So when I'm transitioning from one long-term project to another one, I often like the new one to be very different than the old one, right? Because it's sometimes hard to separate from an old one to leave it and let it go. And the mind, right, is just thinking in these old paths, and I want to change it. So after working on solitude for 10 years or so, I wanted to do something really different. And I had an idea of working with people and was sort of tossing this idea around in my mind. And that's when the Prison Art Project sort of became available to me. And it was a perfect fit. So that's one thing to note about my projects is I tend to really make them different than prior ones. The other thing about my personal projects is they tend to be very internally generated or created or motivated. I just pick topics that I'm interested in. So I did a project on masculinity when I was younger, in my 20s, which was a personal exploration of the archetypes and the shadows side of the archetypes of masculinity. What else? I did a project on children's tree houses, hideouts, and forts. And again, it had to do with that sense of, I spent a lot of time by myself outside in the woods when I was a kid. And so I used to build forts and find forts and play with forts. And a child having a space that adults don't come into is such a special, sacred space. So I was exploring that idea. There's another project which is neither really fine art nor advocacy, because I'm also a little bit of what's the word? I just take opportunities where I can find them. So I was traveling for my pay job once, traveling abroad a lot, and I started doing this project, replicas of the Statue of Liberty around the world.
Huh.
So I found over 200 replicas of the Statue of Liberty in Taiwan and Philippines and South America and Europe. And so I just went around and photographed all of them, which was really a fun project, but it wasn't particularly meaningful to me personally, nor advocating for anything, except it was this exploration of, what is it with these?
Yeah, it is very interesting. It sounds like a very interesting journalistic kind of exploration. Yeah.
It was. I met some very interesting people, and this was before the internet. So I did all the research on this without the internet, and it was shot on film, medium format. I was shooting mostly medium format film towards the end.
That's really interesting.
So what other projects? Well, I think that gives you a flavor. I'm not remembering.
Yeah, I'm actually curious to dive deeper a little bit into the project on masculinity, because you mentioned that you were exploring the archetypes and the shadow types of those archetypes. So what was the idea behind it? What were you trying to show, like some examples of the archetypes that you were trying to reveal?
I think it was more, I was doing an investigation of masculinity. So where do I start with that? And I went out and I just tried to think of, okay, what are some masculine images? So I photographed a cowboy and some hunters with guns and ducks and a dog and all this. So very masculine images. But then I realized that often when you have an aspect such as masculinity, when it gets to the extreme, it becomes negative, right? So a very masculine man could become violent, as the extreme of his assertiveness, there's the archetype of the successful businessman, and then the shadow side of that is the failed businessman. So I would go to bus stations and photograph a man with a valise lying on a row of chairs and wearing tattered clothes and looking sort of lost in life. And to me, it became important to show the archetype, but show the failure or the archetype, but where the archetype goes negative as well. And so I kept bouncing back and forth. Every time I found an aspect of what I thought masculinity could be, I would then sort of search out the shadow side of that, sort of the counterpoint. I continued doing this, and finally the project became more and more about photographing intimate portraits of the men that I had been in a men's group with for 7 years. So it became about these individuals who were also working on issues of masculinity. It was a men's group. So it became a whole journey for me, where I started with these archetypes and ended up becoming very personal and private about these men who we had all grown to love each other and respect and trust each other over the years that we were in this group together. So,
could you say that it was also about you?
Was it about me?
Yeah.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure it was. Yeah, I don't know that I can express what exactly I got out of it, but it's at one point it felt like I had exhausted the project for myself. I had done what I needed to do, and I did feel less anxiety about masculinity. I guess I was feeling anxiety when I started, which is part of, I had questions or anxiety around. And that all sort of resolved because I sort of ended up realizing that it didn't really matter what masculinity was. It really just mattered the relationships in my life is what really mattered.
The reason I'm asking those kind of questions because the projects that you have described so far, the masculinity and the tree houses, to me it sounds like, and I'm kind of a psychology geek. Some people know that about me. So it all sounds to me like a very, very internal exploration. So it's more like you are going on this adventure to discover the subjects outside of you to fulfill something that you are feeling or trying to work out on the inside, which I can totally see the point of exploring the sacred childhood spaces where adults are not allowed, because those are your words, right? It's not like every fort or treehouse says this is a child sacred place where adult is not allowed. This is the idea that you have about this, right? So those are very, very interesting and very deep kind of communications and ideas that you were able to express in a very visual format. So I'm very curious to see the samples of those works.
And they are on my website. I have all of my archive is on my website, so there's a lot of work there. To give you a little more background about that masculinity project, I think part of my why this subject intrigued me is just my own family makeup. So my father was fairly passive. My mother was quite assertive. My brother is homosexual. And I have, it's a mixture of feminine, masculine qualities myself. So for some reason in my 20s, as I was exploring life, this became an interesting subject for me.
And I would, and I would actually think that in your 20s, I think the binary vision of, one's personality was more of the dominant idea of the society, right? So it was really important for you to, having a different different models in your family going and having different ideas, the messages that you hear from the society, go and explore what does it actually mean for you. So yeah, I can totally see that. That's very interesting. It is very. I mean, you can write a book about it.
Well, I'm better with pictures. So,
Well, it can be a coffee table book.
there you go. Yeah, I've thought about, I recently published a book. Actually, I published several books about the Prison Arts Project. Um, the most recent one of which was published by an established publisher. And I've thought about going back and turning some of my older projects into books as well, and that may be something I do. Another project that was sort of a project of opportunity is the image right behind me. It's a beach scene of a little Cumberland Island, which is off the coast of Georgia, U.S. East Coast. My family had a vacation home there, and I used to, when I would go back to see my family, I would always go to the vacation home here. And every morning I would rise before the sun came up and go out to the beach with my camera and shoot for a few hours. And so I did a project on Little Cumberland Island. So that's what that
Very interesting. Yeah, that image is really striking. I keep staring past you through the screen. Very, very striking image. So the books that you have published, are they available? Because I would think that some of our listeners who are listening to us right now in this episode would be curious to learn more about your work and maybe purchase some books. So how can they go about it?
Yes, the books are available for purchase on my website. My website is petermerts.com. Everyone should remember that my name is spelled with an S, not a Z, Peter Merts. But yeah, on petermerts.com, there's a page of books for sale, and they can be ordered from there. Thank you for
Yeah, and I will absolutely make sure that I will put the links in the show notes, so everyone who is not sure about spelling can go to the website, to the show notes, and see the samples of Peter's work and all the links and references about everything we are talking today.
Thank you so much.
Well, I am kind of starting to exhaust the pool of questions that I had for you. I am in awe of the work that you do, especially in your advocacy projects. It's to me, I feel like this is a really important, not only for the art community, for community in general, for the society, with a capital S. Because a lot of people are not even, stopping to think for a second what it is like to be in a situation where you're practically dehumanized in many cases for a lot of time, and you're not only deprived of the freedom of going wherever you please, but of all the other things that we take for granted. And how important it is to bring those programs to those individuals on the inside, to actually keep reminding them about their human side, about the positive things in the world, help them be in touch with their own emotions, or keep exploring those emotions. To me, it's a fantastic work, and the work that you do for those programs is even more fantastic, because through your work, society can see what it is and what it means.
Thank you so much for those comments, Galina. You made me realize one thing I do want to mention about my photographs with the Prison Art Project, which is that the photographs, although they're used by the Department of Corrections and the Arts Council and the teaching organizations and the instructors, I think one of the most important recipients of those images is the families of the incarcerated people. So I make sure that they get images from the shoot, that they can see them, because I post them on my website, and I make sure they get instructions on how to see them, because that's one of the best things that incarcerated people have going for them is family on the outside that they communicate with. And when they're taking art programs, that gives them something additional to talk about during their visitations and when they write letters about what. So, art just really fills their lives up in a way, which is wonderful to see.
Yeah. Absolutely wonderful. So is there something that I did not ask you that you would want to mention in our conversation today?
Well, the only thing that occurs to me is just that one of the reasons I persisted with this prison arts project for such a long time is because I think that the general public, many people, have an incorrect assumption of who's incarcerated. Seems to be an assumption that incarcerated people are irredeemable, that they don't deserve to be treated with respect. They don't deserve a second chance or opportunities to improve themselves. But I have found the people that the minimum that I have met who are in these programs are very interested in bettering their lives. Almost all of them that I've met with, take responsibility for the crime that got them there, and they talk about it openly and freely and frankly. Many of them were incarcerated when they were quite, they did their crime when they were quite young, and I've heard people talk about, I was a kid. I didn't know. No, I get emotional talking about it. They don't know how to manage their emotions, and so they get into trouble, or they're running with a rough crowd because they don't have a home life that supports them, and so they get in trouble at a young age. And then as they mature and grow up, which fortunately people do in school, particularly with a little bit of help, they realize that their path was on the wrong course, and they're correcting it now. And it's just wonderful to see that correction taking place. So thank you so much for your interest in the project and your insightful questions. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your work. This is a really incredible work, and your dedication for over 15 years now really solidifies the idea for me how important that work is.
Thank you so much, Glenn. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much, Peter. Thank you for your time today. I know that we had to reschedule, and that's totally on me, but young mom life is a little chaotic.
Yeah, I'm glad you're feeling better.
But, yeah.
Now I hope you can go surfing and surf behind you there now.
Yeah, I never surfed. So that's something for me to explore. I really appreciate your time today. I was looking forward to this interview. Thank you so much to Annie Buckley for connecting us. Again, for everyone who's listening, all the links and references are going to be in the show notes on our website, intheartscene.com. I'll post everything also on the social media, so you can check the links out there. You can go straight to the website, from where you can go directly to Peter's website and find his work and find his books, a little bit about his biography. So thank you again so much for being with me today, and thank you for the work you're doing. And I will see you next time in the art scene.
Thank you, Galina. Great talking to you.
It has been another episode of In the Art Scene podcast. If you liked today's conversation, please give us a good review on Apple and go listen to other great stories. Check out our website, intheartscene.com, or follow us on Instagram at intheartscene for more content. If you are a creative and you want to share your story, shoot us a message from the website or DM us on Instagram. Look forward to seeing you next time in the art scene.